better the recovery plan. It's a plan that's going to make historic investments in infrastructure, manufacturing, innovation, research and development, and clean energy, and so much more that's going to create millions more jobs, good-paying jobs, not minimum wage jobs. Well, while we work with members of both parties in the Congress, there are steps that we can and must take right now. For example, on Inauguration Day, I directed my administration to pause student loan repayments for interest for the interest payments for Americans with federal student loans until at least September. So they're not going to have to pay till September. They still pay the bill as it stands now, but there will not accrue interest, and they don't have to begin to pay until September. And we may have to look beyond that, I might add. Today, I'm signing an executive order that directs the whole of government, a whole of government effort to help millions of Americans who are badly hurting. It requires all federal agencies to do what they can do to provide relief to families, small business, and communities. And in the days ahead, I expect agencies to act. Let me touch on two ways these actions can help change Americans' lives. We need to tackle the growing hunger crisis in America. 1 in 7 households in America, 1 in 7, more than 1 in 5 Black and Latino households in America, report they do not have enough food to eat. That includes nearly 30 million adults and as many as 12 million children. And again, they're in this situation through no fault of their own. It's unconscionable. The American Rescue Plan provides additional emergency food and nutrition assistance for tens of millions of children and families to address this crisis. But families literally can't wait another day. As a result of the executive order I'm going to shortly sign, the Department of Agriculture will consider taking immediate steps to make it easier for the hardest hit families to enroll and claim more generous benefits in the critical food and nutrition assistance area. This is going to help tens of millions of families, especially those who can't provide meals for their kids, who are learning remotely at home, are not receiving the regular meal plans that they have at school for breakfast or lunch. We also need to protect the health and safety of the American worker. Right now, approximately 40% of households in America have at least one member with a pre-existing condition. Just imagine, you're out of work through no fault of your own. You file for unemployment while you're looking for a job. You find one, and you get an offer. But then you find out there's a high risk of you getting infected with COVID-19 because of your condition. You and your loved one, and you and your loved ones have ever even greater risk of death and serious illness because of the pre-existing conditions. So you turn it down. Right now, if you did that, you could be denied unemployment insurance because you're offered a job, you didn't take it. It's wrong. No one should have to choose between their livelihoods and their own health or the health of their loved ones in the middle of a deadly pandemic. Because of the executive order I'm about to sign, I expect the Department of Labor to guarantee the right to refuse employment that will jeopardize your health, and if you do so, you'll still be able to qualify for the insurance. That's a judgment the Labor Department will make. Look, there are just two consequential ways that the action I'm taking today will help people in need. Another way to help approximately 2 million veterans maintain their financial footing by pausing federal collections on overpayments and debts. Another makes sure that federal contractors who are receiving taxpayers' dollars provide their workers with the pay and benefits they deserve. These are places where federal tax dollars are administered, are being made available to build things from ships to staircases. And the federal government lets the contract, and we're going to make sure that they buy American and are made in America. And here's another. Right now, there are up to 8 million people that are eligible for direct payments from the CARES Act and a relief bill passed in December. They're entitled to those payments, but there's not an easy way for those folks to access them. So we're making it a priority today to fix that problem and get them relief they're entitled to. Look, I'm going to close and summarize this way. A lot of America is hurting. The virus is surging. We're 400,000 dead, expected to reach well over 600,000. Families are going hungry. People are at risk of being evicted. Job losses are mounting again. We need to act. No matter how you look at it, we need to act. If we act now, our economy will be stronger in both the short and long run. That's what economists left, right, and center are telling us. Both liberal and conservative will be better and stronger across the board. If we act now, we'll be better able to compete with the world. If we act now, we'll be better able to meet our moral obligations to one another as Americans. I don't believe the people of this country just want to stand by and watch their friends, their neighbors, coworkers, fellow Americans go hungry, lose their homes, or lose their sense of dignity and hope and respect. I don't believe that, especially in the middle of a pandemic that's so weakened and wreaked so much havoc and caused so much pain on America. That's not who we are. The bottom line is this: we're in a national emergency. We need to act like we're in a national emergency. So we've got to move with everything we've got, and we've got to do it together. I don't believe Democrats or Republicans are going hungry and losing jobs. I believe Americans are going hungry and losing their jobs. And we have the tools to fix it. We have the tools to get through this. We have the tools to get this virus under control and our economy back on track. And we have the tools to help people. So let's use the tools, all of them. Use them now. So I'm going to sign this executive order, but let me conclude again by saying, folks, this is one of the cases where business, labor, Wall Street, Main Street, liberal, conservative economists know we have to act now, not only to help people who are in need now, but to allow us to be in a competitive position worldwide and be the leader of the world economy in the next year and 2 and 3 and going forward. So thank you. I'm going to sign this executive order.
President Biden just about to start signing a number of executive orders. He said we've got to act now quite a few times. Why? Because he said the crisis is deepening and America has the tools to act to prevent families going hungry, to prevent America hurting. And saying quite clearly there, Kayla Tausche, interest rates at historic lows, smart fiscal investment to spend, including deficit spending. To his point that America has the tools to act, these executive orders are a step. They're a small step, though, relative, of course, to the congressional approval that he is seeking at the same time for his $1.9 trillion stimulus bill.
Wolf, that argument for deficit spending with interest rates at the lows that they are is an argument that he made when he first rolled out the American Rescue Plan. It's an argument that his economic advisor continued to tout today. And it's an argument that Janet Yellen, his nominee for Treasury Secretary, has said multiple times in public appearances, including on Capitol Hill just this week. It is full court press from this administration, not only to try to exercise the limited tools that the executive branch of government has to expand some of these programs around the edges, but calling on Congress wholeheartedly, saying that this is no replacement for comprehensive legislation, and really issuing a call to action on Capitol Hill just ahead of a very critical call that is going to be taking place on Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. between Brian Deese, who's the director of the National Economic Council, and a bipartisan group of 16 senators. So that is clearly the next item that's circled on the calendar. The administration has made it clear that this is not a final piece of legislation, but also made it clear through this series of executive orders that it's going to keep wielding the power of the pen where President Biden can.
Kayla Tausche. Kayla, thank you. Earlier today, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson announcing some sobering news, saying that new variant of COVID-19 traced from the UK is not only spreading more quickly, but also may be more deadly. Joining us now is former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb. He's a CNBC contributor, of course, and sits on the boards of Pfizer and Illumina. Dr. Gottlieb, good to have you, as always. To me, that warning from Boris Johnson is only just a reason to speed up the vaccine distribution and administration even faster. Is that happening? Is there anything that President Biden has done as far as executive orders and changes he's made that will speed it up even more so than under the Trump administration?
Yeah, but I think right now the issue is going to become the supply. I mean, the issue to date has been distribution and having enough sites set up that people can access the vaccine and making sure those sites are set up in places where the people who we want to reach are located. So making sure that we distribute them evenly around the country, get into urban environments, places where you have issues with a lack of access to healthcare generally. But as we set up more sites, and that's been happening, we're going to run into problems with supply. Supply is going to become the issue. The one thing that the Biden administration has done that could potentially extend supply in the near term is try to get more production of more graduated needles so that we can make sure that in these vials that seem to have an extra dose in them, where they're overfilled a little bit, if you use a more graduated needle, you can withdraw the vaccine from those vials more carefully and preserve those extra doses. So that's a way to extend the existing supply. The other thing that can happen that could create an inflection point is if the J&J vaccine gets authorized. We're going to have data on that very soon, probably by the end of this month, the company has indicated. That could get filed at some point next month and could be authorized very quickly based on the interim data. And if that vaccine comes to the market, J&J has said that they should have a significant supply by April, and that would really create an inflection point in terms of expanding access to vaccination.
Well, we, of course, hope, Dr. Gottlieb, we get that inflection point in terms of the pace of vaccinations rising. Until then, are you optimistic that the case count has seemingly plateaued a bit in recent days and weeks, or are you fearful that, whether it's because of new variants or other factors, that it might pick up again in the meantime?
No, I think we're going to see continued declines in cases around the country, declines in hospitalizations, and we're going to start to see declines in deaths as well. We're probably seeing that right now. I think the risk is that in places where this new variant has a higher prevalence right now, particularly San Diego and parts of Florida, Miami, we could see regionalized epidemics. Either you see prevalence not really decline, which is actually what's happening right now. If you look at the statistics from Southern California and Florida, you're not seeing the same level of declines in cases as you're seeing in other parts of the country. So you either see sort of a plateau and prevalence just as persistently high, or you see regionalized epidemics. I think that there's a risk that we're going to see regionalized epidemics in the spring and maybe even the summer in parts of the country where these new variants really get a foothold. I don't think we're going to see a confluent epidemic like we're experiencing right now because of these new variants. That's really a risk to the next fall and the winter, that these new variants gain a foothold around the entire country. But there could be regions where they have higher prevalence. Right now, they're probably about 1% to 2% of infections in Southern California and Miami. If they're doubling every week, pretty soon, in a matter of 6 weeks, you could have 30% of infections comprised of B117, or maybe even more. In parts of the country like New York or Boston or Philadelphia, where they might be 0.1%, 0.2% of overall infections, even if they're doubling every week, which has been the trajectory that they're following, it might be too little too late in terms of you get the seasonal effects of spring and summer, which is going to be a backstop against spread, and you also get rising vaccination rates. Hopefully that's enough to create a backstop against these variants from getting a foothold in places where they're not currently prevalent.
And it's encouraging, we've seen data, Dr. Gottlieb, that the vaccine does protect against the new variants, though Dr. Fauci did say the South African strain weakened the effectiveness of the vaccine. If for some reason we get a new mutation, and I understand these viruses do appear to be mutating a lot, that does not work with the vaccine, we're told by experts like yourself and Fauci that you can go back to the lab and redo the vaccine. What's the process? How long does that take? Do you have to have new clinical trials? How fast can that come online?
It's unlikely that you'd get a new variant emerge that would completely defeat the vaccine. It's possible that they can completely defeat the antibody drugs, and in fact, the South African strain seems to do that. You'd probably get a reduced effectiveness from the vaccines. That would be the risk. And, it could be substantially reduced depending on the confluence of mutations that a new variant has. You can re-engineer these vaccines fairly quickly. I'm on the board of Pfizer, which is developing one of the vaccines, as you know. The mRNA vaccines, the virtue of that process, the fully synthetic process for developing vaccines, is that based on the sequence changes, you can re-engineer that vaccine in a matter of weeks. The challenge is going to be whether or not you have to put it through a full clinical development program. FDA really needs to try to work to delineate a process where you can get approval on the basis of a new construct where the only change is the sequence that you using in the vaccines on the basis of experimental evidence and maybe small complements of clinical data. That's effectively what we do with the flu vaccine each year. The flu vaccine gets licensed just on experimental data. We don't even put that into people. We don't test that in people each season because we have so much experience correlating antibody production with those vaccines with their efficacy. We need to get a similar construct for these vaccines. It's possible we may want to re-engineer these vaccines to create a booster heading into the fall to give everyone a booster with a new variant. That's something that scientists are going to have to look very carefully at if these new variants do gain enough of a foothold here in the United States and there's a demonstration that there's reduced effectiveness of the vaccines. Right now, we don't know.
Dr. Gottlieb, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Coming up, the inflation conversation. Wharton's Jeremy Siegel and strategist David Rosenberg have very different opinions on the inflation outlook in America. They will join us for a debate next. As we head to break, here's a check on bond yields, which of course are somewhat reliant on the outlook for inflation. 10-year at 1.09. We'll be back in a couple minutes.